And hello everybody. I'm really honored to have a return visit. I think I owe that to Jeff. So Jeff, thank you very much. I'll try to give you an update on what's been going on and just an overview of what we'll be doing today. We'll give you a little bit of background just briefly, not particularly in depth because I think most people understand the emerging contaminants issue as it exists now. I want to talk about ecological effects of emerging contaminants and human health risks, and to give you an update on what has happened in the last 22 months since I appeared here last. Then an update on what we're doing in Pennsylvania and what we found out, and then turn it over to Ariane to get an update on what the DEP is doing for emerging contaminants in Pennsylvania. You folks probably all know that there's a long list of compounds that we call emerging contaminants. It includes all this long list of things, drugs for humans and for veterinarians, and antibiotics and hormones, and on down the list. You can read the list. But it's a long list, and it's a lot of compounds. Of course, each category within this list has its own many compounds within each category. So it's a lot of compounds, a lot of drugs. And the real issue, or at least one of the major issues, is that many of these compounds that we call emerging contaminants are endocrine disruptors. That means they work on the endocrine system of the body, of the animal body, either human or fish or whatever. These are what we call gender benders. They have effects on the reproductive system. The issue of emerging contaminants was really brought to the forefront in a series of papers about occurrence. And this is where we found out and came to know that these compounds are really widespread in the environment, found in a lot of different sources, but at low concentrations. And the studies that have been done also indicate that you can't just look at the water. You've also got to look at the sediment. Some of the compounds, for example, cotinine and sulfamethazole are found only in water. Others are found only in sediment. So you can't just look at the water and get the true picture. Does that pointer show up on the screen? Sorry, if it doesn't.
Yes, it was there.
Oh, okay,
there
good. Okay, great, thank you. So the big issue is what happens to these compounds once they're in the environment. Do they persist? Do they accumulate? Do they transform? Those are some of the questions that I think need to be answered. In the case of wastewater treatment plants, in fact, a lot of these compounds are excreted or secreted from humans. They go into wastewater treatment plants, and what happens to them at that point? Well, some of them, particularly for activated sludge plants, for these activated sludge plants, the compound is reduced from one influent to effluent water. But for treatment filter plants, there's almost no change in these compounds as they go through the plant. This varies, of course. This is for nonylphenol, a compound called para-nonylphenol. But that varies depending upon whichever compound you're examining. For nonylphenol, this is a situation. For other compounds, it might be that the compound's totally eliminated in the waste treatment process or not at all. How about what happens to these things in finished drinking water? Are they taken out in the drinking water process plant? And in fact, the answer is yes and no. Many of them are removed totally. Some of them are removed partly, and some of them are removed almost not at all. Here's carbamazepine, which is I believe that's given to children for hyperactivity. And DEEP, of course, is an insect repellent. Put it on to avoid mosquitoes. Almost not removed at all through the drinking water treatment process. So the compounds are there. Do they pose a risk? Do they pose an ecological risk? Do they pose a human health risk? There are at least 3 ecological risks that these things can pose. Contaminant uptake into the bodies of the organisms, endocrine disruption in organisms, and antibiotic resistance in ecological populations of bacteria. For example, here's a smallmouth bass with skin lesions. This came from a stream in West Virginia. It could have been a Pennsylvania stream, although we don't see this this severe of a story here, but in the Potomac River headwaters and in the Shenandoah River headwaters, this kind of occurrence is pretty common. There's not really a direct link to emerging contaminants, but there's suggestion that emerging contaminants can cause this sort of thing. There is a lot of evidence in the scientific literature of ecological effects from emerging contaminants, and here's just a kind of a laundry list of what has been found in recent years. And of course, the research is mushrooming now, and I expect as we continue we'll find more and more and more ecological effects from these emerging contaminants. And there was a study done on white suckers in Boulder Creek, Colorado. This was done by Professor Woodling at University of Colorado with support from U.S.G.S. and others. And what they found was that upstream from the wastewater treatment plant, there was about a 50-50 ratio of male to female white suckers. But downstream from the wastewater treatment plant, there was over 80% females in the population. So this is the gender bender effect that I'm talking about. This is the endocrine disruption effect. So these kinds of ecological effects have been demonstrated, they are real. Are there human health risks involved? I've got three big question marks there. In my view, and of course human health is not really my expertise, but in my view, we have not proven to a great extent human health risks exist. But it seems like there are several possible human health risks that do occur. Antibiotic-resistant bacteria can be a human health risk. And I guess as we move down through, I'll talk a little bit more about that. Endocrine disruption could occur in humans, and neurological interference could also occur in humans. Let's talk about the antibiotic resistance. I think this might be the biggest issue from emerging contaminants. Among the emerging contaminants are antibiotics. We take pills every time we get sick. The doctor gives us antibiotics. Those things are effective, but you have to take it for a long time. The doctor says there's a 20-day supply, even if you feel better. Continue to take these until they're all gone, right? You ever get that? So you're taking these things, and maybe you take them all and you excrete the antibiotics, or maybe you don't take them all and you flush them down the toilet. In either way, they wind up in the wastewater treatment plant and perhaps in the environment. And perhaps then some of these bacteria may, maybe somebody's out playing in the water. Maybe somebody's skiing on the lake or on the river. And so maybe these things wind up in humans. And what happens is bacterial mutations can occur. In a population of bacteria, there could be millions of bacteria. Mutations, genetic mutations occur all the time. And maybe some of these mutations result in a drug-resistant bacteria, and then that drug-resistant bacteria is the only one that survives because the rest are killed by the antibiotics. And so now you have a population of antibiotic-resistant bacteria. Let me go back just a sec here. In fact, we are finding multiple drug-resistant bacteria for tuberculosis. That's the MDR-TB. And we are finding extremely drug-resistant bacteria for tuberculosis. These are in America, just started. Primarily, they're in Africa. Dave, I heard you say your daughter's in Africa. Well, I hope she's not involved with any of this stuff. But anyway, they can't stop these things. And people are dying. And then you probably heard in the news about MRSA, methicillin-resistant Staphylococcus aureus, which is staph infection. And these things are resistant to the typical antibiotic. It doesn't work. So I think this is maybe the largest potential impact from emerging contaminants. Dr. Stuart Levy, a microbiologist at Tufts University, says only one bacterium out of a population has to survive in order to replenish a complete new population of resistant organisms. That's worrisome to me.